So thanks to Lauren for inviting me to talk here about the Pay for Performance Program, VPFP. You will note that up until a few weeks ago, maybe a week ago, we were referring to this as the Pay for Phosphorus Program, but it was requested that we change it to performance. What do you think of that change? Makes sense? Both works. Okay, great. Yeah, I think it was to avoid confusion that we were, trying to. The goal of the program, which I'll talk about in a second, is to compensate farmers for, creating phosphorus reductions by implementing conservation practices on their farm. We wanted to make sure that it was clear that we were, paying farms for those phosphorus reductions, and not giving out bags of phosphate like the NRCS did some decades ago. What was that? I know, I recall reading about that. Yep, a lot of things, yeah, it's a wild time. The goal of this program, we have at least one farmer who is a current participant in the farmer that's joining us here, but I think also the intended audience was also farms that might be interested in enrolling in the program in the future. And before I get started, I do want to say, I'll give Mario a chance to talk here, but just what kind of the overall agenda for the talk here. We had 2 hours scheduled with this small group here. I think we'll be able to kind of get through what I want to talk about in about an hour. And so if we have some time for questions afterwards, I'm happy to answer any questions about the program. But I am planning on giving just kind of a brief overview of the program, where the funding for this comes from, what farms that are looking to enroll in 2023 should be on the lookout for, and how they can be preparing to apply for the program. And then we're going to talk kind of briefly about some overall results of the programs in terms of overall PLOS that we're seeing on different types of farms that have enrolled in the program in 2022. I'm going to try to show off FarmPREP during a quick demo, just to show you what the site looks like, which is the software that we're using to kind of manage the data in this program. And then we'll talk about some general PLOS trends, how conservation practices are generating phosphorus reductions on farms, and we'll have time for a quick Q&A. But before I jump into that, Mario from UVM introduce himself, but is part of a research. Oh, hey, Ken.
Hey, how you doing?
Oh, okay. We've got a few other people joining us here. Mario's doing some research on farms participating in the phosphorus program or the performance program. So I'll let Mario introduce himself.
All right. So hello, everyone. So my name is Mario Machado. I am a postdoc researcher at the GUND and the College of Ag and Life Sciences at UVM. So I'm currently doing a couple different research projects in Vermont on PES programs in the state. And one of my newer projects that I'm working on is looking at farmer decision-making, motivations, and sort of general stewardship goals through the Pay for Phosphorus Pay for Performance Program. So this is going to be a 2-year project. So it has a couple different phases, but the first phase is just going to be interviews with farmers that are enrolled in the program currently, sort of gauge people's understandings and motivations and concerns, or excitement around various aspects of the program. So for those that want to participate in this, I'm going to be starting with a series of interviews this coming winter. So I have some amount of budgeting, so about $50 to compensate farmers for participating in interviews. About an hour long. We can do it either in person or virtually. I personally I live in New Hampshire, so virtual would be easier for me, but I'm happy to travel to farms also. I love visiting farms. So yeah, whatever works. But for those that are interested, I'm happy to, Brodie has my email address and contact info. And also Sonia will be sending out at some point in the next few weeks, a general informational email with some more details about my project, sort of what it entails. happy to answer any questions either today or some other time over email or by phone. So yeah, but thanks very much.
Forward to get some good questions from you when we're done here. All right, we're just going to talk a little bit about where this program comes from and how we're funding it and kind of what the rough timeline is moving forward here. So this program is being paid for by a conservation innovation grant. Well, two grants are kind of paying for the inception of this program. We received a conservation innovation grant from NRCS to help us build FarmPREP. Again, this was the web application that we're using to manage the data and the modeling in this program. And then we also have an AFA agreement with NRCS, which is paying for kind of the bulk of the payments out to farmers, as well as helping us provide technical assistance to farms to get them through the program, which the conservation districts are our contractors for that. So kind of being the folks who are actually sitting down and working with farms and getting their farm management data into the program and just kind of helping them kind of get through it all. So as of right now, it is a 5-year kind of pilot project that we're running that should go until mid-2026. So the 2025 field season is what we're currently expecting to be our the last field season of this first phase of the project. However, there's always a chance that we might get additional funding or be able to get an extension if our budget allows for that. But overall, it is a $7 million grant with about 4.9 of that going directly to producers. So
where's the other 2.8 million go?
Sure. So Kent here asked, where does the other 2.1 million go? And so that is to pay our contractors to give TA, and then also some of that is going to the folks who are developing FarmPREP as well, which is Stone Environmental. They're the company that is building FarmPREP and kind of doing all the modeling in the background.
Sorry, I came in.
Oh, that's okay.
Late.
That's okay.
So you're working with those Stone Environmental is the environmental firm that you're working with?
Yes, they built FarmPREP. They developed it with some direction from us on our team. It's Judson Peck is kind of our lead for kind of helping build out FarmPREP to be able to have it match our program's needs. But Stone Environmental is building it, yeah. And we're doing maintenance on it on a regular basis, and we have a series of updates that we're going to be adding onto the program to be able to I think better account for different management styles and to make sure that the math that's going on in the background is working and makes sense. So, like I said, with these AFA alternative funding arrangement grants, it's really nice. It's a great way for the state of Vermont to take advantage of federal resources and bring it into Vermont. This is from the national NRCS. This isn't a grant from Vermont NRCS. So this way, NRCS provides the funding to us and also gives us some guidelines that we should be following. We have to follow their privacy rules. When it comes to sharing farmer data, all that's protected, whereas in anything else, any other farmer data that the state keeps is subject to public records requests for the most part. This information is being kept kind of in a different location, and also we need to do some of NRCS's compliance reports and make sure that we're meeting some bare minimum standards, which is nice. It gives us kind of a framework to make sure that we're compensating farmers for work that they're doing. So the question was, is the data that farms provide us through this program ever going to become public? And I think, if this program is a success, if farmers like it and are interested in participating in the future, but we're not able to get funding from NRCS or another source to continue it, you know, maybe it would be something that they would want the state to fund. And then if that was the case, then those privacy rules would change. But I think our you know, so that's still a little few ways out here, but.
If the project goes well and it's all good, we want to release it, and this would be some.
Yeah, so sure. The question was, is if I'm a farmer and I'm participating in the program, can't I share the data with whoever I want to? Absolutely. It's your data. If you want to share it, you can. When we share, I'm going to share some aggregated farmer data, kind of just averages. And so that's what we're allowed to share when it's aggregated and not attached to a particular farmer. But you know, if you're a farmer and participating in the program, you have access to this information. I'm going to show you, you know, how to get into that. It's your information to share. So, you know, so what makes this program, you know, different from most other conservation programs that are managed by, you know, the state or NRCS out there is, you know, the goal of this program, or so most current programs, you know, provide cost share or a payment per acre based off of any practice that a farmer might be implementing, right? $40 per an acre of cover crop. This program is trying to attach the payment that the farmer receives to the outcome of that practice. So, you know, whether that is in pounds of phosphorus kept on the landscape as opposed to going into a nearby waterway, a ton of CO2 kept in the soil or sequestered rather than going into the atmosphere, etc. And so, and there's a few benefits to doing that, but you know, we can see that, you know, really every other program that's offered in the state is, you know, it pays for the practice, pays for the, you know, a percentage of the cost of the program. And, you know, we're really trying to tie that payment to the outcome that everyone can kind of benefit from, including the farmer, but the water quality benefits that the public's going to, you know, benefit from. And, you know, part of that too is because, you know, the state puts a lot of effort, and our federal partners put a lot of effort into trying to, you know, we are trying to quantify the water quality benefits of all these practices that farmers are implementing, right? So when you apply to do cover cropping with either NRCS or the state is compiling that information and, you know, assigning a certain, you know, phosphorus, when we're talking about phosphorus reduction efficiency to that practice. You know, the issue with that is, of course, every soil and part of the landscape's different, depending on all of these management factors that go into putting that cover crop on the ground. And also, in that way, when we're only, you know, if farmers are only putting some of their land into cover crop through NRCS or the state, but are, you know, are hitting their payment caps, or, you know, only doing some and paying for some, but there are others, we're missing a lot of great work that farmers are putting on the landscape, and not capturing those, you know, reductions that we're getting, which makes it, you know, difficult for watersheds like Lake Champlain or Memphremagog that are in these have these phosphorus TMDLs, these, you know, very lofty clean water goals. It makes it, you know, we're missing that data. So what this program does is kind of takes a whole farm approach and tries to incorporate all of the different kinds of practices that farmers are implementing, and, you know, keeping that in one location, so that we can kind of account for everything that farm's doing, and then also compensate that farmer for that work. So I just jotted down a few program goals here. But right, you know, we're being able to leverage federal funds to pilot this new data-driven approach. which is a really great opportunity for Vermont. We're really grateful of that funding from NRCS. This also helps us kind of like target what we are limited public resources towards areas where we might get the most significant phosphorus reductions in these TMDL watersheds, right? So a cover crop being implemented on, in a more erosive soil will potentially prevent, keep more phosphorus on the landscape than it would in a farm with less erosive soil, right? We're targeting our resources towards where they're really needed. And also it provides farmers a new conservation planning tool in the form of FarmPREP, right? The first year of this program in 2022, we have 50 some farms enrolled in the program. And I will say, I don't think we've been able to really commit the time to getting farms to be as hands on it, because we've put a lot of that effort has fallen onto the shoulders of the conservation districts or anyone else that's helping them with FarmPREP, because there is a lot of, it is a data intensive program, and trying to have a farmer sit down and really go through everything in their nutrient management plan that needs to go into FarmPREP is a burden. But I think after, similar to nutrient management planning, once you do it 1 year and just having to maintain and update your current management year after year, it gets a little bit easier. So I think moving forward with farms that are enrolling in the program, it is our goal to get them to have more hands-on ability to use FarmPREP, which we'll get into a little bit more in a second. But by being able to use this program, they can kind of play out different scenarios. Well, what happens if I do no-till and cover crop on this field? Sorry, we do have a question in just a second. They can really strategically plan to maximize their phosphorus reductions and compare those potential economic benefits they could receive from participating in a program like this with the costs of actually implementing those conservation practices. We have a question in the back. In 2022, I believe we had 56 or 54 farms enrolled. And that was out of over 90 farms that had applied for the program in January, but some were ineligible because they needed to do some work on their nutrient management plan. Well, I think we actually have a few figures about that in a second, but we have small farms, certified small farms, medium farms, and large farms participating in the program. We have a veggie farm that has 25 acres enrolled, up to, I think, a large farming operation, a dairy farm, that may have 2,000 acres enrolled. Yep. I would say the majority of them are dairy farms. We have a few that are just specialized in just crops that don't actually have, cows. But we have 3 veggie farms in the program right now. So, yeah.
Have they had an opportunity to apply for next year? And
Oh.
So how is it going?
Oh, that's my next slide here. Okay, we're gonna keep going here. All right, so program application 2023. I was asked to include this, and we do not have a specific date set for when we were going to release applications for the 2023 crop season. I will say that for this first cohort of farms that we worked with in 2022, for those of them that showed that they were making significant enough phosphorus reductions to stay part of the program, which I'll talk about our funding structure in just a moment here. We signed 2-year agreements with those farms, because really this is work that to really get a benefit out of, it's something you should be able to do for, multiple years, because it's all about comparing where you're at to where you could go in terms of phosphorus reductions. That being said, we plan on opening applications either late December or early January. The best place to receive updates from us about this when we do release it is the Vermont Agency of Agriculture's newsletter. That's the hyperlink there. I can send that to anybody that needs to. My contact information will be available at the end of this. And I will say, we are expecting, we received many, we received almost 90 applications in 2022. I think there's a lot of excitement from farms to be kind of a part of this new program. The fact that we already have this large cohort from this first year that we want to see through 2 years into the program, I think it does mean it's going to be a lot more competitive. This first year of the program, we were excited that we had such a high turnout for applications. We wanted to, keep as many farms that were eligible to bring them into the program. But I am expecting, if we do receive a lot of applications, it will be a little bit more competitive. And so farms that will have we'll definitely, with that application, when it rolls out, we will list kind of some eligibility, or not eligibility, but priority farms for us. But I can definitely say we probably will prioritize farms that are in phosphorus TMDL watersheds. We do have many farms that are on the eastern part of the state right now that are part of the program. It's a statewide program, but I think it does make sense for a pilot program of this nature to really focus on Lake Champlain, Memphremagog, where we're really trying to reduce those phosphorus loading rates. And also, farms that are implementing just a high percent of conservation practices. And I should have put it, if they're self-funded and not part of NRCS EQIP or CSP or CSP, farms that are not enrolled in those programs, will probably be more of our target. As of right now, you can be part of both this program and FAP or EQIP. But I think we'd really like to spread out our resources as much as possible so that we're not, overpaying for the same practices. And most importantly is if you have, all the information that goes into FarmPREP comes out of your nutrient management plan, and not just your plan, but the records that are associated with that plan. So you need to have up-to-date soil tests, which is every 3 years if you're a certified small farmer or larger. Question?
Would there ever be a chance to combine FarmPREP with crop so that there wasn't redundant data entry?
Yeah, we've gotten comments about that. It is unfortunate that, and also not just Go Crop, but also these other TSPs, are using their own program software as well. There is some, I guess, we have a few like Excel sheets basically that can be where data can be compiled and then bulk entered into FarmPREP. But it does take some manual data entry, and yes, it is duplicative with Go Crop. Unfortunately, because these programs were made by different people, they don't talk to each other really in a significant way. You can batch upload soil test results the same way that you can for Go Crop. So that's like, hundreds of, potentially how many fields you have, hundreds of numbers that you don't need to punch it individually if you already have it on a sheet. You can talk to that a little bit since you were doing a lot of this data entry. So I'm pointing to Lauren Weston.
Yeah, so one of the things you can do is you can upload sheet files of the field maps.
Yep.
It's really handy. There's a lot of maps. It is kind of like a question of scale. When you get to it more, do I spend my time? If you can Excel file, I'll upload or do other two things. So I think this is kind of now what you need from your entity to go into FarmPREP is actually not. It isn't
Sorry, yeah, if you want to come up, Lauren, please. I'll answer that question.
Hey folks, sorry. So to answer the question of if GoCrop and FarmPREP can talk to each other, the answer still is no. As someone who is doing a lot of the data entry, what you can do is upload field information and shape files for the maps. That's really helpful. But actually the amount of information that goes into GoCrop, goes into FarmPREP from your NMP is actually not that much data. You definitely need to have it up to date. You need to have a plan for how much you're spreading, but it's really about your soil tests, how much you're spreading, what you're spreading, and how. So stuff kind of from your Russell 2s,
Yeah.
but not necessarily
Yeah, I guess-
very visible from your NMP.
Yeah, there's those Russell reports and having those
Yeah.
be up to date and accurate. And we're gonna, I just did a time check. I'm a half hour into this, but we are gonna go into FarmPREP and I'll show you how to enter in data for one field. Like I said, we really, folks for this program, should really be very nutrient management plan literate. I think it's different for everybody else. Every farmer in the state gets assistance from someone, typically somehow in their nutrient management planning process, whether that's a conservation district or a technical service provider that they work with directly. They all come in different forms and it really depends on the size. But there is a lot of, really crucial data that's in there. And, farms are really already required to keep all this information. And so, it really shouldn't be anything new. But I think there's, a real difference between, farms that know their nutrient management plan and those just like throw it in the shed and don't look at it all year. Because the other part of this is good records. We really want people who are keeping on top of their, manure and fertilizer records. And also, those that are managing crop rotations, keep good crop records of what's going on in the field between years. And, some folks, when they write nutrient management plans, we really want them to be agronomic, based off of, what is really happening on the field, what their real targets are for getting different nutrients on the fields, and not just ones that are like copy and paste. What is the most phosphorus I could apply on this field in a year without getting in trouble with the state? Because if you put that information into FarmPREP, you're not gonna have great results. So I'm gonna show off FarmPREP in a little bit here, but we're just to kind of, it's something I've been talking about a little bit, which we haven't really been able to get to see yet. But it is I'm just gonna click all the way through this so I have it all in front of me here. It is it is a web application, so a website that you can go to. You get a login. We create farm pages for people, very similar to GoCrop. However, I think the difference being is that rather than running the P index in the background, we're running an Apex model, which is really it really is kind of a little bit more complex, and with the goal of it to actually estimate the pounds of phosphorus per acre per year that is coming off of these fields based off of the management inputs. And so, I mean, it's pretty complicated, but it simulates the actual movement of sediment and nutrients and chemicals, and it grows the plants in the background. It's based off of the crop type, the crop rotation, because it does simulate multiple years and then returns an average. You put in your, what kind of tillage equipment you use, nutrient application rates, both manure or commercial fertilizer. You do put in your real soil and manure tests. We can simulate buffers to a certain degree, the space between the edge of the field and the nearby water conveyance that may be kind of taking that runoff from the field. And also, what kind of separates it from GoCrop is that there is a map, there is a web map built into the program. So where we have USDA soil layers, it calculates the slope of the fields, and also we have Vermont climate data that is kind of like, simulated to kind of represent some of the microclimates that we have in the state. And it models edge of field phosphorus loss over a 30-year time period. So folks that are implementing crop rotations can get a very serious benefit, because we know that you can't just take 1 year of either climate data or field management data and get like an accurate result, because we don't want to punish farms for either a good or a bad weather year. So it really takes in real Vermont weather data. All right, we're going to talk about our payment structure, and then we're going to get into FarmPREP. So we have 3 types of payments that we're offering farms through this program. The first one is our data entry payment. This is a one-time payment for farms that are enrolling in the program. And regardless of their phosphorus reduction results, we are compensating farms $15 per acre to a max of $4,000 just to enroll in the program and to enroll their farm in the program. We do have some eligibility requirements for this, of course, but this is really just to compensate the farmer for the amount of time it takes to work with someone from their conservation district or their TSP to put, to do all the data work, to put in their maps, to put in all this management data, because it can take some time. Yeah. So that's just for completing that data entry process. And then we have 2 types of performance payments. So probably the most significant is our phosphorus reduction payment. I'm going to have a graph to follow this in a second. So we are compensating farms for the net number of pounds of P reduced from a historic kind of management scenario. But we start that for farms that are reducing above 40% from that historic baseline. It's because of all the programs that are available to people, because the RAPs was passed, we do have kind of a set baseline expectation of how much phosphorus reduction farms should be able to achieve in the state of Vermont. By putting in those RAP buffers, by using nutrient management planning, et cetera. So this program is really aimed at farms that are going above and beyond. So that are making very significant phosphorus reductions from putting a lot of conservation practices on their farm. And that $100 a pound of phosphorus, really we did arrive at that number based off of some of the TMDL reporting that's been done in the state, right? Talking about the state is putting money towards reducing pounds of P, and for each different sector, there's a great graph in those annual phosphorus performance reports. And it shows how agriculture and roads and natural resources projects are all compared to each other. And far and away, reductions coming from agriculture are our most cost effective of all sectors. And they come in around, when they're calculating those P reductions, it comes in around 100 pounds of phosphorus, $100 per pound of phosphorus. You're familiar with those, those performance reports. I'm sure you help out with those. In addition to that, something that we discovered through our first year of the program is that these historic baselines that I'll talk about, where we get those from in a moment, these historic baselines can really they're really different depending on where your farm's at in the state. And, you know, it really depends on the soils that you're farming on, the slopes that you're farming on. Everyone has this very different starting baseline load that we're comparing them to. And for some farms that are implementing a very high rate of phosphorus or of conservation practices across their farm, it's difficult to achieve a very high phosphorus reduction from that baseline. Folks that are doing, you know, manure injection, cover crop, no-till, you know, are having these very low overall rates of loss, but not hitting that 40% threshold. And we wanted to create a payment path for farms that are in that situation, that want to use FarmPREP, that want to engage with the program. Sorry, one second. And so, you know, after doing some analysis, you know, these 1 pound per acres and these 0.5 pounds per acres, like average loss across their whole farms, is what we would consider to be low, or, you know, in this case, like very low, with like 2, 3, and 4 pounds per acres being pretty high. And so if, you know, they're pretty low payment rates per acre, you know, these might be subject to change over time, or at least all these payments are subject to change over time, you know, depending on our budget and what we feel is appropriate for farms. But that is another payment path for some people in this program. I saw a question in the back. Where that's coming from? Yeah. Let me show you in the graph. One of the design goals of this program was to tie the phosphorus reductions. They were measuring reductions, but to measure reduction, we need to compare our current management to a baseline. And so our baseline is based off of the Lake Champlain total maximum daily load, the TMDL. Because when that was written, the people that modeled agricultural, you know, non-point phosphorus losses on farm fields because they didn't have all this data in front of them, they didn't know what exactly farms were doing, they didn't have the FSA crop reports, they made assumptions about how land was being managed in Vermont. And so we call these HBMAs, historic baseline management assumptions, but really we should just call it our base load. And those are based off of your soil types as mapped by the USDA, your slope, and also 1 year of satellite imagery. And they kind of grouped up farmland into these different groups on this big map that covered all of Vermont. And they said it was either in continuous corn with, you know, conventional tillage, 10,000 gallons of manure going on each year, cover cropping on some, not cover cropping on others, depending on the drainage class, or it was in a corn hay rotation, or it was just in permanent hay, or it was pasture. And so we are overlaying those layers onto in FarmPREP. And so whenever you draw a field in FarmPREP, it is automatically assigned that base assumption based off of how you drew it and what's going on in the background there. And because we really wanted to make sure we're measuring these reductions from the TMDL baseline, because it's our eventual goal that we'll be able to, you know, claim some of these reductions for that reporting, for all these, you know, Vermont's lofty water quality goals, and to, you know, be able to report that on a whole farm basis. Does that make sense? And so that 40% threshold, so, you know, no matter what your, you know, we're kind of taking a relative amount based off of what your, you know, baseline load was. So this is your whole baseline, right? That's all of what you were assumed to be losing in terms of phosphorus in 2008 when the TMDL was written, or 2010. And here is your, you know, here is your current load. You've reduced your output by 60%. And so you know, you've passed beyond that 40% threshold, because this is where we kind of expect every farm to be able to achieve because of all of the resources that are being put their way and all the regulations that have been passed. And so it's anyone that is, for folks that are able to move beyond that, that is where they get that $100 per pound of phosphorus payment. Sure.
The TMPL, are they changing all of the month?
So it was, yeah, so they put in, you know, each sector got it their own base load, right? So forest was put in, but there is this like, you know, there's a raster layer, right? So in ArcMap, there's a raster layer that shows how all, you know, so how they took overlaid soil maps and slopes on top of all of Vermont. And then for just the ag land, they assigned an HBMA to it. And that's how they modeled those losses.
Even on the connected river side?
Yeah, well, so the thing is, we can recreate those. We know what those assumptions were because of the documentation from the TMDL. And so we recreated those assumptions.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Like that's
I've got a picture of like what that all looks like. You can like see the actual layers of how things are divvied up, and it's, you know, our valleys are with well-drained soils is continuous corn, and everything else is hay or corn hay. I think I skipped something. We were just talking about how we are the maximum payment cap for a farm per year is $50,000, so it's a pretty high cap. Yeah, for everyone that's in the program right now, we signed 2-year agreements to take them through this program for 2 years.
is that 50,000 to 4,000?
No. The $5,000 cap does not apply to the 4,000 data entry payment. It's a different category. So to talk about what that looks like on one individual example farm, we are, this is as an example, this is a farm with 41 fields that have been entered into the program. That's the x-axis. This is 41 fields. And the y-axis is the potential, or is the payment rate that's been assigned to it, you know, based off of those, comparing the baseline for that field to the current management. So you can see that some fields that have high reductions above that 40% threshold have positive payment rates. And then we also have a group of fields that seem to have, that are not achieving reductions beyond that 40%, that are kind of taking away from that farm's payment. So we have, you know, this is where we're taking the net. We want to take the whole farm approach and add up all the, you know, the pluses and the minuses and add them together. Because we want to make sure that, you know, farms are getting credit for the fields that are, you know, the practices that are putting in those fields to create those reductions, but also, you know, incentivize them to look at those fields where they're seeing high phosphorus losses that aren't, you know, that are comparing unfavorably to that baseline, and to think about how to change management on those fields to increase their payment rate. So this farm example would get a 13,000 payment for these 41 farms in the program. I don't want you to spend a lot of time on this graph here. Well, if you can tell, we're really getting into the details here. This is a 2-hour session, so we wanted to really dive in. We have a small audience here, so yep.
Before you move on, the area on the previous slide that was a negative situation.
Yeah.
Does that correspond to the more erosive type soils that you alluded to earlier? I mean, you said that stone was responsible for this model, this
Sure.
FarmPREP.
Yep.
And, 10 years ago, they came up with the critical source area mapping. And I was wondering if that was somehow being accounted for in this method. And if there's a tendency for these critical source areas to land that may be credited.
So, yeah, I'm thinking of how to rephrase that. Yeah, well, here, let me answer it. And so by comparing, this two management scenarios on one field, yes, so we're comparing on a field by field basis is how would the TMDL model this farm? What are they currently doing? Are they doing a better job or a worse job of that? And, those historic baseline managements, assumed, pretty, the farms that weren't implementing, conservation practices, no, conventional tillage, lots of manure. Said in some cases they do model that some people were doing cover crop, but not on all of them. It depends on the drainage class. And so by comparing the current to the baseline on each field, even if it's very erosive, you're still going to be comparing, potentially, hopefully better management compared to worse management on the same, with the same soil conditions, the same weather conditions. So you should also, we want to be seeing improvements compared to this baseline.
But mentioning, I guess, maybe lower your other payment.
Like potential payment.
Not the reduction there.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll look at if your soils are really erosive,
Mm-hmm.
you just can't get low on top rate.
Yeah, it's like there's kind of like two paths of, I think, of like, payment through this program. It's either, maybe you are managing very erosive soils, very erosive land, and you're going to have a really high base load because of that. But you also have greater opportunity to create a higher fraction of reduction by transitioning a field out of corn into permanent hay, right? It's a great way. If you're farming erosive soils, maybe that's the thing to do. And if that's what you put into FarmPREP, you might get a really great payment for that field out of that, right?
So it'd be an extra incentive.
Yeah, what's it?
It'd be an extra incentive.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Karen, I think you had a question too.
Well, I think I was going to think about it as a possible answer. We spent a while since the model that was done established phosphorus laws.
Mm-hmm.
So they use similar factors.
Yeah.
So you don't really have to compare source areas. This should have benefit based model should actually have. Maybe more likely white balance, but it's the base modeling is going to do the same thing, but still do
Yeah. Yeah, it should be very similar. So like, we have some watersheds that are, kind of known for having high base loading. Farms that are in those watersheds, would maybe want to be a part of this program if they're making changes in management. Yeah, this is just a graph we kind of used to as we were thinking about that second payment rate, just for farms that have, general pretty low P-loss. This is the spread of our phosphorus reductions. This is our 40%. These are farms that achieved reduction. These are ones that didn't meet that 40% threshold. And this is total P-loss across, average P-loss across all of our farms here. So this is like the whole spread. These values are a little bit out of date because we've done some updating, but it kind of shows you like, some farms we have this group of farms that had very low P-loss, but you know, we're implementing a lot of conservation practices that still, you know, where their, you know, their loading rate was so low, below 0.5, but still weren't meeting that 40% reduction threshold. And we said, we just wanted to create a path because we don't want folks to use this program for just 1 year. You know, I think it's our goal to, you know, encourage them to use FarmPREP, to do conservation planning, even if they're already in a good place, to continue to, you know, use it. And especially this first year where we, you know, we lose a lot by farms, you know, dropping out of the program before they've had a chance, I think, to, you know, really be a part of it. Okay, I'm going to show some of these PLOS results. It's 3:54, and we have 2 hours scheduled here, so I'm going a little bit slower, but I think it's good that we're able to like address people's questions. Oh, I'll just say too, you're managing the Zoom. If there's ever any questions that come in through chat, we can, you know, make some time for that at the end. All right. So this is some of our kind of summary of results from year one. We had 54 farms in the program, not 56. Farmers put in more than 3,000 fields into the program for more than 39,000 acres. So it's a pretty big group for our first sample size. Here are some, this is a summary of phosphorus loss results across all of these different farms, and pretty interesting results. And what we're seeing is that, so this is a graph of current PLOS, and that is that most fields in Vermont have relatively low PLOS, and that a good portion of it, and I think this comes out of this critical source area, is that there are fields or like, you know, sub-watersheds in Vermont that are contributing the bulk of this non-point agricultural loss. At least that's what this small sample size shows. And so we had, you know, 12% of the fields accounted for about half of the total PLOS that was measured through this first group. So there are like some fields that, you know, perhaps are being managed, you know, aggressively, that on very erosive soils, and can, you know, really add up to, you know, to be a high amount of total PLOS. It'll be really interesting. You know, all these numbers that I'm showing you is really based off of these farms' plans for the year. And we're in the middle of the process of updating this information based off of what they actually did, based off of their records, based off of how things changed from their plans. So come next spring, we're going to have, you know, a lot better data and a lot more, you know, a lot more of this kind of generalized information to share. Sure. I'm just going to skip over some of those. Give me a second to have some water. So we just wanted to show, so this is from, these are current values on the right, these are from the baseline, these are from current management scenarios. This is how comparing in box plots, how corn hay rotations and hay fields differ in the program and veggie in the current, because there's no veggies in the baseline. And I think it's interesting because you can see that, I mean, this is a pretty big, you know, spread of, we do have a lot of outliers on some of these, but I think the takeaway here is that hay fields have very low PLOS in comparison to ones that are in annual, you know, rotations and and corn hay and adding a hay into a corn rotation can make a really big difference when it comes to P loss too. I think it's cool that I think this program can compensate folks for implementing crop rotations, unlike some other programs, because it really takes that longer term view of P loss and takes that average. Sure.
Okay, can I say, like, is corn hay really corn hay, or is it sometimes alfalfa rotation, or like there are additional crops that you already have here that can go into farm prep?
Yeah, we can show the whole. Yeah, you can. There's a difference between grass, alfalfa. If you have more than 30% of your field is legumes, you can count it kind of towards that. There's corn silage, grass, soybeans, mixed vegetables, small grains, and we are adding pasture in 2023. We didn't have pasture in the program for 2022, and we are currently in the process of testing it in FarmPREP right now. Somewhat quiet in here, with the door closed. This is, I think, something maybe worth pointing out here. Our data guy, Judson, made all of these. So I'm presenting these for the first time here. But I think one thing worth pointing out is that the baseline does have a lot of corn hay rotations put into it. And that's because when those assumptions were made about how land was being managed in Vermont, they used the soil type and the slope to kind of assign it, but then they did use 1 year of satellite imagery to compare those values, or to compare against that assumption. And if it was grass over a field that had been modeled as continuous corn, they turned it into a corn hay rotation. So there is a lot of corn hay mix in the baseline, and that's how it compares to our current, where there's a lot more hay fields in that were reported in our first batch of farms, and also more continuous corn with corn hay still being a pretty significant portion of it, but not as much. And this just shows kind of like average P loss results for these different crop types, and how they compare. And again, it's continuous corn, even with conservation practices, and most farms that were participating in this program this first year we had a lot of no-till farms, a lot of manure injection farms, almost so many people that cover crop. I think that's why they signed up for this program this first year. It's a lot of folks trying to do want to get credit for that work that they're doing, and so generally too, our current people generally did their current results on these different crop types were better than the baseline, with the exception of hay, and that just might be because folks that are managing hay farms are putting more manure on it on an annual basis than the baseline may have suggested. And that is just a kind of all this summed up together is what's really interesting is, on average, farms that participated in this program were right around that 40% threshold. So obviously, we had a lot of farms that did better than that, some that came under it, but that is the average, which is kind of interesting. That's what we set our baseline at. Again, just to, it's difficult. It's one thing I'm trying to do is trying to really wrap my head around what kind of these typical pounds per acre P losses that are kind of the average or the normal, because this is the first time I've ever started to look at fields in that way, but it's something that's kind of a cool thing, part of this program. Okay.
So you just stop the screen share. No, we screen share the web browser. This is not.
Okay. How's everyone doing? Do I still have your attention? I'm throwing a lot at you. You can? Oh, it's already, okay, great. Because I think I was just sharing my second screen. I'm gonna grab this.
I'm going to talk about Tyler too.
L? Sure, we can get to it when I come to it. Okay. So water. So this is what FarmPREP looks like when you log into when you get into a specific farm view. One thing I'm not showing is there's a login page. Everyone has an account that we've been given them. So you can't just go and make your own FarmPREP account. You do need to be part of the program right now, but I think for folks that really wanted to get out and test it, we might entertain that to put in practice scenarios. But thus far, everyone who's just in the pay for performance program is able to get into these. And so we're able to, so TA providers as well as farmers all have different login accounts, and they can access the farms that they're working with. And so this is just a test farm that I have made just for kind of presentation purposes. You can see that we're on Hog Island here at the Missisquoi Wildlife Refuge. When you first log into FarmPREP, kind of the first thing that you should do is add your fields in. So that can either be done by uploading shape files if you have them, or you can just go in and draw a field. And so I'll find a empty space over here, and it's very simple. All you got to do is click just like that. Double click and say, test 3 or something. And then it will be automatically in the program. And so now that I've done that, it shows up on our field list. I wish I could there we go. So we can see a little bit more now. We have this, we can see it on the map interface to the right here with the rest of the fields on this farm. So that's one really nice thing in comparison to GoCrop or some of these other programs, is that you can see all the fields right there. There's also a bunch of information that's populates immediately. So for that field I just drew, it's 13 acres, it's in Covington clay, it's a D soil with a 2% slope. And this is mapped as a corn hay rotation on poorly drained soil. You can edit it and things like that, but really where the bulk of the farm management information lives is in these what we call assessments. Same as when you write a nutrient management plan, you create one for each year. We're doing the same thing. You can see there's a bunch of examples here. I've been just using this to play around a bunch of different times. But it's in these assessments, and we have both actual and planned. So planned is the version that you create in the spring based off of your nutrient management plan. And now we're in the middle of the process of updating actual assessments based off of field records for the year. So I'm going to go in, and so you can see how these are all complete, but I'm going to go in and edit this. So first thing you do is you would enter in farm manure characteristics. I will say, let's say one oversight in this program thus far is that you can only enter in one manure source per farm. And so what we ask people to do is to basically aggregate all their different, they have multiple manure pits. They take the weighted average. We've provided tools to the folks that are working on this program to be able to do that. But the way, and so rather than enter in manure application rates in, gallons per acre, we ask people to do it in pounds per acre. And that way we can, make sure that we're getting more accurate, application rates of the actual nutrients on those fields. We might be able to change that in the future. So there's a little bit of a development roadmap for FarmPREP right now. And then we would go into fields. And this is where, so every field that is entered into the program, including that one I just added called test 3, automatically gets put in there. So you can add and take away fields while you're working on an assessment. But once you drop down this field list here, there's 3 different areas to enter in information. So we're entering in soil characteristics based off of soil tests. Soil test phosphorus, pH, aluminum, and organic matter are the ones that we care about the most. And then also we do have folks put in what kind of tile drainage that they have on their farms, whether it's random, so like a singular dendritic line of tile just through a wet spot in the field. We have them just put in the depth of that. We're not mapping it exactly. Or you put in whether it is pattern tile, and we also have people put in, the depth there, 48 inches. Did you have a question about tile while we're on it? Okay. And then, so for, then we would enter in crop data, and I'm just going to clear all this right now. And so you can see that here are the 6 crop types we can enter in right now for in our crop 1 space. Pasture will be an option at the bottom here and has its own different inputs. We did work with some grazing specialists, Amber Reed, to kind of help us develop this, the pasture portion of the program on what are the important inputs. But we're going to do this corn silage field, and we're going to say that it is, we do 4 years of corn silage before we put it into a different rotation. We do, so something that we're doing in FarmPREP is we're simplifying the options for data entry for folks, because there's a lot of different options that Apex can model, but we didn't, it's always a balance of like, what's the most important data we can put in versus what's going to make this take forever to do it, because it already is a lengthy process. So our tillage options are conventional, no-till, and reduced. So reduced being like chisel or disking. We'll put in reduced tillage, and then the options for reduced tillage field is are we incorporating the manure or are we injecting it? We're going to inject this manure. We're going to put down 35 pounds of phosphorus per acre. We're going to put down some corn starter. I'm just making these numbers up here for commercial P and commercial N. We're going to do some reduced tillage in the fall with no manure applications, and we're going to put down a winter hardy cover crop, and we're going to put it down by October 1st, right? So we're limiting the amount of options. You can't put in the exact date. We don't differentiate between like drilled or broadcasted cover crop right now. You can put an interseeded cover crop into the program. Right, so we're, as we're launching this program, there's a limited set of options. And one thing we want feedback from farmers on is, is this, enough information that we're, giving you credit for the work that you're doing? Or, you know, or do we need to work on adding something to the program? Because we're able to change this program as we go along, especially if we, you know, get out of this first 5-year phase. But it does take time and money to make all these changes. You know, we have to pay our contractors to be able to do it. So we want to make sure that whatever changes we do make is going to be used. So anyways, for our second crop, we can put alfalfa, grass, hay, and legumes, and put some, you know, cuttings in, whether we're surface supplying or injecting it, and we're going to apply some manure to it. The last options for fields are whether they have buffers or not. And we're just going to be putting in the average width of that buffer. This is something that in FarmPREP, you know, it is. I think it's one of the more challenging inputs to get right, because what it's modeling in the background is the actual, you know, the area. You want to put in the width of, you know, the area of either forested or non-forested, you know, land between the edge of the field and the intercepting water body. I think this is something that's very difficult to do, that has, you know, that's a sloped field that has multiple different areas coming, you know, multiple different concentrated flow areas coming off of it. It's something as conservation planners that are helping farms with this program, you know, if it really doesn't make, if you want to give, you know, farmer credit for this buffer over here versus that buffer, maybe it makes sense to split that field up. You know, maybe it doesn't, because what we're doing is we're adding some space between the edge of the field and that water conveyance where nutrients are going to, you know, filter out and drop out over time. So it's something that we want to give farmers credit for, but it's, you know, we want to make sure we're doing that appropriately. And then we can also enter in grass waterways, but there's not many of those in the program. Yes, to include a grass waterway, it has to have been installed by NRCS. So that is my very quick FarmPREP demo. You know, I have a few other, you know, I've got a few other graphs of results to show you, but I think at this point I've talked long enough, and if they come up during questions, we can address them then. But I think I'd just like to take any questions that folks have.
How does tile work in FarmPREP?
FarmPREP, when you add tile to a field, it changes the drainage class, right? So it moves, you could, I don't know if I'm getting this exactly right, but it, you know, it changes D soil to a C soil. And also it opens up a new PLOS pathway. Oh yeah, here's the other last thing. I was like, let's look at our FarmPREP results here for this farm. So this is what a results page looks like. It gives us all of the results for our baseline, for like, so individual PLOS across all those fields, and as well as the current, with kind of a summary of the comparison between these two at the top. So it actually, you know, it estimates our payment, that if this is what our actual management is, that's what we would be paid through this program. The total pounds of phosphorus reduced compared to the baseline, the percent of phosphorus reduced from the baseline, you know, total PLOS between the baseline and the current, how many pounds of manure we're applying through both manure and commercial fertilizer, total acreage of the farm, those should always match. And then it also breaks down PLOS into 3 different pathways: sediment, soluble, and tile. And so you only see tile if you have it included in the thing.
And then that payment number is only for reduction.
Yes, it doesn't, yeah, I know, we haven't added the secondary payment into the program yet. Yeah. Are there any other questions? Like manure, like the phosphorus extraction from a manure. So, yeah. So, you know, if a farm was doing that, I think how they would see that in this program is kind of through the nutrient management side of it, right? So if you're able to put in how, you know, you apply, this is how much phosphorus I'm applying because of, like, you know, the volume of manure I'm putting down. But of course, it all goes back to what your manure test results are, right? So farms are required to take manure tests for all their sources every year. And so if you are applying manure that has less phosphorus in it, that would show up in how much you're applying on your field each year. So if you're applying very low amounts of phosphorus, right, it's always a balance, because with crop yield, right, with more phosphorus that's coming out of the ground from the crop that you're harvesting, you know, that's taken into account with all this, you know, annual losses. But of course, there's a balance there, right?
To the soil with less phosphorus. So is there any way that program say, oh,
It does do that over time, yeah.
but the new more carbon on that, and so I guess it's all based on phosphorus reduction.
Yeah, so you know, so organic matter is one of the inputs that you put in for your soil test. So you know, you have to update that as you take them. So not only is it, but I think the model does account for changes in organic matter over time as well. But also, you know, you keep on changing your starting point by keep on taking your test. So if you are building organic matter over time, you should be able to show that in this program. I'm so sorry. Yeah. The question was, how are farms that are implementing phosphorus reduction technologies to their manure, how could they benefit in this program?
So let's say there's a farm that has I guess I just wanted to kind of circle back to the manure and aggregate kind of concept. Even though they might be spreading a pack on one given field and might be spreading liquid on a different field, that isn't necessarily taken into effect in FarmPREP, but is taken into account in that your nutrient management plan should have said how many pounds.
Exactly. Yeah.
Are going onto that field based on your source originally. So you just need to make sure your nutrient management plan reflects what you're putting on.
Yeah, like the relative amounts of phosphorus. Yeah, I mean, I wish that when they had built it originally, that I think that was one of my first kind of glaring problems with something like FarmPREP is, like, of course you want to have multiple manure sources, because most farms in the state do. Like I said, I've got a long list of things I'd like to add to FarmPREP, and it's just a matter of kind of completing the development that we've put into it thus far, before we go back and kind of try to fix things. And again, farmer feedback and from our TAs is the most important part of that feedback loop.
If a farmer changed their feed management plan, and then it showed up in the manure as a reduction in phosphorus, and it's a 2-year agreement, do you think that would be time enough to reflect that and capture it? Or if they went to a grass-based bidder?
Yeah, I can say, so the question was, if someone changes their feed management to, have manure that has like a lower phosphorus concentration, that's the word I was looking for, would that be reflected in this program? And yeah, I would say that's probably because, again, if you go back into your nutrient management plan, you're applying, this volume at this concentration, you would have lower P being applied to the field, lowering the risk of potential losses from runoff. But also, but yeah, switching to, I will say, grass-based dairies or grass-based farms are doing really well in this program, because those, again, those rates, you know, if your baseline assume that you're all in hay, because you're farming on 5% slopes across your whole farm, it is hard to get a significant reduction because your baseline might be so low already. Again, that's why we added that second payment path, because we want to, you know, still work with those farms if they, you know, want to use FarmPREP. You know, if you're farming grass in what, you know, theoretically was continuous corn in 2010, and making that farm transition and pasturing, well, again, pasturing in 2023 can be added into this program. You know, I think that those farms will do well.
So if I'm a farmer and it's November 1st and I want to apply for baby phosphorus, what do I need to do to get ready to apply for this program when the application does open?
Yeah, so what you should do, so if you're a farm that wants to apply for this program in 2023, what I would do is I would make sure my nutrient management plan is up to date and based off of, you know, that I'm applying rates at an agronomic rate, and that my plan is an accurate reflection of my management. If not, I would reach out to whoever helps me with that and start working on updating it. I would make sure I have soil test results that are up to date for my farm size, which is 3 years for certified small farms and up. I would make sure I took a manure test of all of my sources in 2022. And I would subscribe to the Vermont Agency of Agriculture's newsletter, which I can pop into the chat, or you can email me and I will send you the link. I'm just gonna pop that up on the screen again. Oh. Can you think of anything else that they should be doing?
I guess I would say if they have questions when the application does open, they should ask their conservation district staff person or you.
Yeah.
I think every conservation district has been working in FarmPREP for a year now.
Well, not everybody. There's, I think Bennington or something did. But yeah, most conservation districts are up to speed with what's going on with this program, are becoming FarmPREP experts. Yeah, Mario. I did share some at the beginning. Not in this PowerPoint. I do, again, and think something is, you know, we'll really be able to show some great data points when this first year is complete. Because right now, all this data is based off of what they plan to do. I'm sure, as we all know, that, you know, plans don't always go as well as we'd like them to. And I think that, you know, these results that we get in, you know, March of this year are going to be a lot more maybe reflective of what farms are doing.
Another question for you.
Sure.
If I'm a farmer, what's my responsibility in all 3 phases?
Yeah, so again, the 3 phases of the program being data entry, data verification, and data upkeep. So we are working with the districts to go out and field verify these practices, making sure that if someone says that they're putting in cover crop in FarmPREP, that we can go out into that field and see it and see that and make sure it's growing there. So your responsibility as a farmer really comes down to making sure that you are keeping good records. You know, yeah, you're maintaining your nutrient management plan. You're, you know, willing to spend time to help your TA provider do the work that they need to do. Which is, you know, in April is to give them a good copy of your nutrient management plan and be able to answer questions about it. in the fall, you know, be responsive and let them know what your cover crop dates were. If anything changed from your plan, if you had to till up a field and turn it into corn, it was planned on being in hay, tell them that. And yeah, just to be responsive. Sure. Great. Well, thanks everybody. There's no more questions. Yeah, it's a exciting program to be a part of, and it's, you know, infancy here. It's you know, data driven, so you know, takes work, but hopefully the, you know, farmers are able to get, you know, a good amount of, you know, financial benefit out of it, but also to be able to have this data in hand and to be able to show, here's the good work I'm doing. You know, I'm doing my part for meeting Vermont's water quality goals, and coming at that from a really whole farm approach rather than just piecemeal practice by practice.
It's great to see this. Because we've heard about it for 10 years. We had a question about 10 years. When are we going to help incentivize farmers and support them? Great to see that.
Sure, and maybe as one more closing statement too is, some of you may be aware that there's a kind of a group at a stakeholder group at a much wider level, the Payment for Ecosystem Services Committee, that was kind of charged by the legislature to study this issue and come up with a, you know, a holistic way to compensate farms for the work that they do to benefit the environment. You know, this is not that program. This is you know, solely focused on phosphorus. You know, maybe there would be an opportunity to, you know, add in other environmental parameters to it down the line. But for right now, this is, you know, really focused on, you know, phosphorus TMDLs in the state of Vermont and being able to help us account for that. So, you know, this isn't everything. This isn't organic matter. This isn't carbon. This isn't nitrogen. The whole slew of ecosystem services. So, as you can see, just doing one of those is enough work. So, yeah. Sure. Yeah.
I don't work with the PES working group directly. Actually, I was just at a meeting this morning with them. So I do work indirectly with some of that stuff, and I'm part of some of those conversations. But a lot of the research I'm doing sort of on this program is meant to sort of inform some of those discussions going forward. So a lot of feedback from farmers and people that we get, you know, either through my research or through this program in general, I mean, it's all part of like a broader conversation in Vermont about a lot of important issues, not just related to this program, but a bunch of other programs. So yeah, all the feedback generally is really appreciated. So yeah, I'll leave it there. But yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks so much for your time. I know this is a long presentation, so I really appreciate it. Okay.
Hi, everybody on Zoom. Thanks for coming.
See you soon. Thanks, Brodie.
Shoot, darn, never mind. I'll get back to people on Zoom after, sorry.